You got the touch. You got the power. Yeah!
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Oh, sorry, didn't see you there. Well, hello and welcome to But I Digress, the vlog where sometimes my mouth goes faster than my brain. I am your host, Nathan. Call me Nate Marchand. Now, I was reading some of Shakespeare's sonnets in order to find some inspiration, because if you've been paying attention to my website, you would know that I have been participating in NaPoWriMo, or National Poetry Writing Month, wherein participants are to write one poem a day for the entire month of April. And let me tell you, it has been one crazy marathon and one heck of a challenge, and I've enjoyed it immensely. It's actually one of the reasons why I haven't put out a new vlog in a while. Well, one of several, not the least of which that being that I was involved in a car accident last week, but I digress. So, I thought with it being NaPoWriMo, I would give all of you, my readers and my viewers, a few tips on how to write poetry. Now, I will admit poetry is not something that I write as much as other things, but NaPoWriMo has been so much fun that I find myself wanting to write even more of it. So I thought I would share a few things that I've learned about it with all of you, so that you too can be a poet and know it. First and foremost, your poem must have a good idea. I don't care if it's a big idea or a small idea, it needs to have one. A poem can't survive on good writing alone. I don't care how good your rhyme or your meter or your structure or your language is. Without a good idea, your poem is hollow. That is why there are poems that people have been reading for centuries while all the rest of them get forgotten, because they had a good idea. Now, I'm not talking about your poem's content or its topic. You can write a poem about a tree, but if that's all it is, no one will care, or at least they won't care for very long, because it'll be boring and uninteresting. Now, take that poem about a tree and do something with it, like use it as a metaphor for someone's life, how they're born as something small like a seed and grow into something large and mighty like an oak or a maple. Or you could use it as a metaphor for someone's life about how a tree is born in the spring when its leaves start to grow and then dies in the winter when the leaves fall off. Because an idea is what gives your poem substance. And ideas not only are bulletproof, but they unify people's thoughts and feelings. Next, focus on brevity and rhythm. Poems are short, so you have to take your idea and compact it to as few words as possible. Now, epic poetry does allow for more verbosity, but nobody writes those anymore. Maybe I should. Even then, those authors still take their ideas and reduce them to as few words as possible. You also need to select words that help to denote the poem's rhythm, whether it's read silently or out loud. This is a great way to help express the poem's theme or idea. The example my English professor always used back when I was in college was this Robert Frost poem, whose title escapes me at the moment, that when read properly had the rhythm of a horse walking down the road. Now, getting these right can be difficult depending on which poetic structure that you use. Still, don't waste words when you're writing poetry, because, just like with wit, brevity is the soul of poetry. Third, use powerful imagery. Next to brevity, the most important ingredient of a good poem is imagery. So use words and descriptions that create visions and sensations within your readers' minds. And appeal to as many of the senses as you can. Don't just limit yourself to the eyes and the ears like a lot of writers do. Use taste and smell and touch. In your imagery could be literal, when you're describing a person, place, or a thing. It could be metaphorical, like in the example I gave before, where you liken a person to a growing tree. Or it could be abstract, when you're describing something like emotions. Regardless, throw as many of those in there so you can get the most impact with as few words as possible. Fourth, draw from experience. There's an old adage among writers that goes, write what you know. And that's especially true when it comes to poetry, because, generally speaking, the subject matter of a poem is derived from the poet's life. You'll find no better wellspring of ideas for poems than that, my friend. So, take all of your thoughts and your emotions, your memories, and channel them into your poetry. Not only is it cathartic, trust me, I know that from experience, it also helps to lend your poetry authenticity and a ring of truth, so that it appeals even more to your readers. Fifth, stick to your genre if you use one. So if you're planning on writing a poem with a certain kind of form, whether that's a ballad or a triolet, do your homework on that particular poetic form so that you know what is expected and what you need to do to achieve that kind of a poem, whether that's a certain number of syllables per line, a certain number of lines per stanza, whatever kind of rhyming scheme that you need. So that way you know how to do it right and you don't make yourself look like an idiot because you're trying to go for a certain kind of thing and end up with something else. And it also would help so that way you can know, if you want to be different, what kind of liberties you can take with this particular kind of poetic form. Then also it would help to make sure that you don't go from writing in one kind of form into something else. Like you start writing a sonnet and it suddenly becomes a free verse poem. And finally, find your voice. Another thing that my English professor was fond of saying was, write like you talk. And that is definitely true when it comes to poetry. So often poets think, especially if they've read poetry from a certain time period or a certain culture, that that's how they have to write their poetry in order to write for the ages or something like that. And nothing could be farther from the truth. So don't waste your time with meter or rhyming schemes or language that's completely unnatural for you. It'll just make your poems come across as artificial. So write your poetry how you talk. It'll come across as a whole lot more genuine that way. And trust me, there's already a lot of pretension out there in the poetry world. So do your best to avoid it. So there you have it. My top tips on writing poetry. Poetry may be short, but it can be very difficult to write well. So you'll want to practice often. But if you can get it down, it's very rewarding. So, in light of that, I've decided that I will read my top 5 favorite poems from this year's NaPoWriMo in a future video, which I'll probably post within the next week or so, I think. Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. G.I. Joe! Thank you for joining me this week on But I Digress. This is Nate Marchand, signing off.